Solomon the Silly.
Stop that.
Solomon the Wrinkly. Stop. Solomon the Stinky! No!
It has been said that the world is a character, because like a character, it develops over time and holds its own differentiating sway over the story that unfolds. But many genres have their own strengths with this notion. The sci-fi genre has a world that's familiar to our own but remains over-exaggerated. Westerns hold true to our past and places the audience in a forgotten time of hardship and prostitutes.
You stole my prostitute!
And like sci-fi, the action genre amplifies a familiar world. Every genre I can think of holds different values that shape their own worlds, however outlandish or recognizable they may be, which is a difficult task to put into consideration, as modern topics should never overshadow the approach to good storytelling. Which brings me to the fantasy genre.
Finally!
Fantasy is a genre that has placed a firm footing on pop culture, as its typical tropes of elves, goblins, wise wizards, evil sorcerers, and noble knights are more than common knowledge. So I feel explaining its detail is a pointless task. However, I feel that I need to explain what makes it work and what makes it fumble, and why so many Redditors foam over The Witcher. Stuff like Dungeons & Dragons, World of Warcraft, and Magic the Gathering predates the acceptance and popularization of something people call nerd culture.
No! You're not going anywhere, motherfucker!
Back then, your typical WoW player looked like this. But now he looks like this.
I was playing a game called World of Warcraft. I missed the call from Zack Snyder to tell me I got Superman.
But, did you hear the phone ringing?
I did.
And you chose to ignore it?
Absolutely.
Did you win the video game?
Sadly, no.
This was because fantasy had a reputation of pretentiousness and pointless explanations.
I don't understand a thing in this game, bro. This game has done nothing but just confuse me, bro.
Whether it was deserved or not is subjective, but what normalized nerd culture around, I'd say, the 2000s, is because high-quality entertainment was being pumped out repeatedly, and people thought, you know what? This isn't that bad. That's what I said after trying murder for the first time. For legal reasons, this is a joke. Again, it's subjective, but I believe one of the biggest contributing factors to this was Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones thrived on its complex developments of the world building and the characters, played by more than capable actors, as the untrustworthy plot throws you through a loop of frustration and loss, as the bad guys would always win, but when the good guys win, it comes at a cost. Nothing ever seems fair in this show, and unfortunately, that unfairness drifted into its quality. In the season final, major plot points left viewers feeling unsatisfied and questioning the significance of previous storylines, as the rushed and nonsensical plot in Season 8 also retroactively ruined the earlier seasons. But nevertheless, its relevance in pop culture was undeniable, and thus pushed fantasy into mainstream. And audiences knew even something placed in such a nerdy climate could still be effective. And now you feel its influence on hundreds of other shows that came after, like Invincible, The Boys, Rango, Succession, Rango, Stranger Things, Rango, and The Witcher. Speaking of which... Please laugh. The TV show for The Witcher is one of those things that needed a level head over the writers, as they were able to make some good and effective lines for each character to make them feel unique to one another, but they still craved to pretentiously show off with superfluous out-of-sync storytelling and trying so desperately to deviate from the source material. Are you kidding me? And for a while, the level head was Henry Cavill, who has declared many times that he is an avid fan of The Witcher.
Apparently on set, you know more than anyone else.
I wouldn't necessarily say anyone else, but I'm a big fan.
Yes.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, so do you correct people?
I don't necessarily...
But ultimately, it was Henry who was the best part of the show, which sucks, as he was always pushed to the sidelines of the story, even though the show is called The Witcher. And he was eventually fired. What? This is what made the show destroy itself. Because at the end of the day, if you have a cynical hatred for the fans, then you're going to do terribly. Because the fans are the ones who watch it. And we've seen this happen with Star Wars, Halo, the MCU, the DCU, and now The Witcher. Which brings me to the main reason people watch the show in the first place. The game.
Sticks mud plug into ass.
For me, the game is a mixed bag. As in terms of gameplay, I believe The Witcher sucks, please don't hurt me. Its clunky movement, repetitive combat, and pointless quests is what made me dislike The Witcher the first time I played it. No, hey, lower the gun, no, don't do it, please, lower that gun, hey, just listen for a minute. I stand by this, and you're allowed to disagree with me. I didn't like it. That was until I got to Skellige. At that moment, I understood why people love this game. You see, your experience is defined by your expectations, and I went into The Witcher expecting something like the first Red Dead, but it's more of a really polished single-player MMO, exploring the beautiful mountains or ugly battlefields while you hunt monsters for coins, as every choice you make has consequences that sway on the story or side quest. It's not a game to be enjoyed for its gameplay, but for its complex characters and world building. Sound familiar? It is the same mindset that must be applied when playing Red Dead 2, in that you have to actually roleplay the role-playing game, and purposefully immerse yourself into the world. Such is one of fantasy's greatest strengths, as the epic scale of action and consequences has been replicated many times, but not as well as The Witcher's. But the enchanting world building of fantasy is one that is understated. From Software thrives on this, as the world tells the story and the characters sit there being depressoed.
I pity the sorry souls. Is that really Lordship's last reward?
Every new enemy thrown at the player holds some reflection of the location they are in. And these locations aren't like any other. They hold a sense of beauteous wonder and gothic Lovecraftian grimness, and enchant the player as their bones become toothpaste, as what you do is just roll, hit, but what the enemies do could be anything. And it's terrifying.
You have no skills and you're a loser!
And this has influenced many other games afterwards, and even made a genre in itself, called Souls-like, but I prefer to call it self-inflicted torture. But what those other games don't achieve that From Software does so well is the ability to give the audience a beautiful gift of escapism with its amazing worlds. And there's a giant dog with a sword.
CeraVe contains 3 essential...
Which brings me to another game. Skyrim. Yeah. I bet you didn't see this one coming. This is where I repeat myself. Like The Witcher, the gameplay is garbage, but the world is incredible. But I feel that Skyrim did a better job for me at least. This is because the world has a far more grand and mythic scale. Allow me to explain myself. As a child, I craved going on some mythical adventure, as I would hike through the mountains, explore uncharted ruins, and make my fortune in a fantasy land. Your inner DMs, I'm letting the greed consume me. Skyrim was a game that really encapsulated this fantasy as much as it could. Considering that games hold such rich escapism, I found myself just taking any random path and going on a quest to retrieve an item or stop a bad guy, and it really harkened back to the craving of adventure I had as a child, that video games were able to fill. The world of Skyrim is so mesmerizing with detail that still holds up today, which makes me understand why Starfield just isn't a good game, and why so many other games have tried so hard to do what it did. It's the world that makes Skyrim a legacy, and my god, it's stunning. Now, I blame this fantasy of mine on things like Fable and Adventure Time. But there was something else. Something that I am more than proud of saying was a part of my childhood. 3 films that I can say, without a shred of doubt in my mind, is the greatest thing to come out of the fantasy genre, or even the best trilogy to ever exist. This is going to take a while, but I'll say this. Don't watch Lord of the Rings. Why? When talking about the technicality of a film, The Lord of the Rings feels like it came out last year. Not so much graphically, but in terms of its style. Stuff like the epic battles, the orcs, and things that only get 2 minutes of screen time like the Balrog, are so deliberate and purposeful. The design of the set pieces, the armor, the weapons, and just everything with the characters and the world has so much meticulous detail. Even just a simple shot of Aragorn fighting at the top of a hill as the camera slowly pans down is mesmerizing, especially when you consider the year it was made. This is assisted by the perfect soundtrack, the otherworldly and stunning backdrops of New Zealand, and the larger-than-life acting.
I will be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf!
I'm on 17!
Ah! I have no pointy ear outscoring me! What's happening out there?
Shall I describe it to you? Or would you like me to find you a box?
These things make the world building of Middle-earth feel fulfilling and natural, rather than just a chore, and actually benefits from its 3-hour runtime. As things aren't always explained and they just exist, because they have faith in the audience to have their own interpretation, rather than just telling them everything. The score made by Howard Shore, that rhymes, is done perfectly, in that it effortlessly matches the tone and mythical sense on screen. The triumphant sound of the battle as the tide turns, the menacing horns rolling in as orcs march on, and the devastation of loss.
3 darts is too much!
But more importantly, it knows when and how to present itself. Some moments of action are met with silence, and that makes the moments when the music finally starts feel more important, and the music itself is able to carry a scene. When King Theoden returns, the audience doesn't know his history or his character, but when he unsheaths his sword, we can feel the stress of its importance purely through the music. This care and detail went into the performances as well. The infamous toe scene that shaped hundreds of "Did you know?"
Did you know, in that scene?
Orlando Bloom broke a rib, Viggo Mortensen chipped a tooth, and Sean Astin tried to eat some glass with his foot. But beyond the injury, the acting itself never feels contrived or ill-tempered. Ian McKellen was born to play Gandalf. He naturally fits the role because his voice and face already suits the stereotype of an old wise wizard. But my brother in the arcane arts, he nails it. He knows exactly how to present his actions and his voice in every scene. You could land a plane on Agent Smith's forehead, and I'm not gay. But Aragorn is dreamy, he's so handsome and cool.
We travel light. Let us handsome walk.
Oh man, I wish I was him. Carl Urban, the dude from The Boys, is also in this.
Think you got your bullocks? Oh, come on then.
Andy Serkis does the role of Gollum so easily. It's probably like putting on an old glove for him. It fits perfectly. Unlike O.J. Simpson, I didn't say that.
And Peter Jackson, my precious, who do you think you are, you f***ing hack? Shame on you! Shame on you! Go f*** yourself!
Every actor never tries to overextend their role and remains true to who they are and what they need to achieve without any attempt to overshadow another. This is just some of the aspects that make the film memorable and relevant. The risks they had to take and the dedication to even get this film made feels like something that's just missing in modern Hollywood. Pure passion.
But on the day that we arrived in Poolburn to start shooting my favourite sequence of the film, my 3 runners were the walking wounded. I had Orlando Bloom with a cracked rib. I had Viggo Mortensen, who had just broken 2 of his toes, and Brett Beatty, who was our scale Gimli, who had to do all the running, had dislocated his knee. And we didn't have doubles for them because, you know, I had to do shots where they were running up past the camera. I mean, there's like Orlando runs past and says a line, and it's got to be Viggo. I mean, it's got to be the guys actually running.
Come, Gimli, we're gaining on them!
Viggo, Orlando, and Brett were just real troopers, and they just said, listen, you know, let's just shoot the running.
But fun fact, did you know that Lord of the Rings is actually a religious movie? And Peter Jackson said this in an interview.
We didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honour Tolkien by putting his messages into it.
The religious symbolisms in Lord of the Rings are abundant. Whether you believe in this stuff or not, these ideals are what ground the Lord of the Rings into a succinct and coherent structure, as it remains faithful to the message Tolkien was trying to push forward, and therefore makes its story organised and fulfilling, with each plot point holding more weight to the real world rather than just mindlessly reflecting it. Which brings me to Rings of Power. I have not seen this show, but my understanding of it is that the consensus believes it is a mindless attempt to push agendas rather than telling a faithful story, with empty characters, obvious revelations, and lack of creativity in a world that Tolkien worked so hard to create. But as someone who has remained politically unaffiliated with any group as my opinion shifts from left to right depending on the situation, I will say that my opinion is not fueled with "the movie bad because movie woke." But I must say I find it very annoying that Amazon was just greedy and couldn't make something that the Lord of the Rings fans appreciated. But you know what's more annoying than that? The Hobbit. This I have seen, and I wish I didn't. Please pour bleach into my eyes. I believe the main problem with The Hobbit is that you have 1 book to make 3 films on, whereas Lord of the Rings had 3 books to make them on. So naturally they bumbled around to find ways to fill its story, and it ended up just becoming messy and clumsily delivered. But I had an epiphany. Just ignore them. If you really don't like them that much, then just don't watch them and pretend they were never made. Because if you sit down and celebrate the achievement that is Lord of the Rings, then you don't need to dwell on the failures of its predecessors.
And that is an encouraging thought.
But what did Lord of the Rings achieve? Well, to go beyond its biblical symbolism, its influence on modern entertainment is untouchable, as I believe it holds a message that some of the greatest pieces of entertainment has reflected. Lord of the Rings reminds us that the ordeals and tribulations of life are universal and unavoidable. Whether it is evil or pain that has been inflicted upon yourself or from another, it can feel like you're facing insurmountable odds. When everything is against you, when you so badly want to give up, when it feels like you have nothing left, when life keeps kicking you down, and finally, you are faced with your worst problems and fears. What do you do?
For Frodo.
Lord of the Rings encourages the audience to face the world head-on, as Aragorn's only fear wasn't death or pain, but failure. And at that final moment where the odds are stacked against him like it has been many times before, he continues to fight, as a reflection of manhood, which is a reluctant potential for good that only requires the faith to keep fighting because that good is something worth fighting for.
Stone by stone, cracked, crushed, fallen.
What are they?
They were once men.